Jake Thompson pushed his cleaning cart down the long hallway of the Galactic trade station. The wheels made a soft squeaking sound on the metal floor. It was 3 in the morning, station time, and most of the aliens were sleeping in their quarters. This was when Jake did his best work. He had been cleaning this station for 20 years. 20 long years of mopping floors, emptying trash bins, and wiping down surfaces that alien visitors had touched. To everyone on the station, he was just the night janitor. Nobody important, nobody worth talking to. Nobody worth noticing. Jake liked it that way. He stopped at the first door on his route. Inside, he could hear the deep rumbling snores of a Zephyrian trader. The Zephyrians looked like giant bears, but with blue fur and 4 arms. They came to the station to buy and sell goods from across the galaxy. They always made a mess in their rooms and never said thank you when Jake cleaned. Jake used his master key to enter the room quietly. The Zephyrian was asleep on the large bed, his massive body taking up most of the space. Empty food containers were scattered around the room. Purple liquid had been spilled on the desk. Jake had cleaned up this same mess 1,000 times before. As he worked, Jake listened. This was his real job, though nobody knew it. While he cleaned, he heard everything. The aliens talked freely around him because they thought he was just a stupid human janitor. They had no idea that Jake understood their languages. They had no idea that Jake remembered every single word they said. Jake had not always been a janitor. Before this job, he had been Captain Jake Thompson of the Human Defense Corps. He had been trained in intelligence gathering, linguistics, and military strategy. He had served for 15 years before taking this job on the station. Everyone thought he had failed somehow, that he had been demoted to cleaning floors. They were wrong. The Human Defense Corps had sent him here on a secret mission. His job was to watch and listen, to learn about the alien species that visited Earth's most important trade station, to gather intelligence that could help protect humanity if there was ever trouble. For 20 years, he had been the perfect spy, hiding in plain sight. Jake finished cleaning the Zephyrian's room and moved to the next one. This belonged to a Vorthari diplomat. The Vorthari were tall, thin creatures made of what looked like living crystal. They glowed softly with their own light and made musical sounds when they walked. They thought they were better than everyone else, especially humans. The Vorthari's room was much cleaner than the Zephyrians, but Jake still had work to do. As he dusted the crystal formations that the Vorthari used for meditation, he heard voices from the next room. The walls were thin, and Jake had learned to listen through them. 2 voices were speaking in the clicking language of the Nexus Collective. The Nexus were artificial beings, robots with advanced computer brains. Jake had learned their language years ago by listening to their electronic conversations. "The final preparations are nearly complete," said the first voice. "Excellent," replied the second. "The humans still suspect nothing. Their primitive sensors cannot detect our fleet movements." Jake's hand stopped moving. He had been cleaning the same spot for several seconds, but his mind was focused entirely on the conversation. Next door. "Fleet movements? What fleet movements?" "The Hegemony Council has approved the final timeline," the first voice continued. "The attack begins in 28 standard days." Jake's blood turned cold. The Hegemony was an alliance of 6 alien species that controlled large parts of the galaxy. They had always been hostile to humans, but there had been peace treaties, official agreements that prevented open warfare. "What about the Human Defense Forces?" asked the second voice. "Our intelligence indicates they are completely unprepared. They have become soft during the years of peace. Their military has been reduced. Their weapons are outdated. The electromagnetic pulse will disable their defenses completely." Jake carefully moved closer to the wall, pretending to clean a light fixture. He needed to hear more. "The orbital bombardment will target the major population centers first," the first voice explained. "Earth's capital cities will be destroyed in the first wave. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow. After that, the ground invasion can proceed without resistance." "How many human casualties are projected?" asked the second voice. "Initial estimates: suggest 60% of the population will be eliminated in the first day. The survivors will be processed for labor assignments. Jake felt sick to his stomach. They were talking about killing billions of people. His people, his species, and they were discussing it like it was a business transaction. What about the other species in the Galactic Council? The second voice asked. Will they intervene? The Vorthri have already agreed to remain neutral in exchange for trading rights in the former human territories. The Zephyrians will provide logistical support. The others are too weak or too far away to matter. Jake heard the sound of electronic data being transferred between the two robots. Plans, he realized. They were sharing detailed plans for the invasion of Earth. The humans trust us, the first voice said with what sounded like electronic laughter. They think we are here for peaceful trade. They have no idea that we have been mapping their defenses, studying their weaknesses, preparing for this moment. Their ignorance will be their downfall, agreed the second voice. In 28 days, the human problem will be solved forever. Jake heard the robots beginning to move around the room. Their conversation was ending. He quickly finished his cleaning and moved his cart to the next room, his mind racing with what he had just learned. 20-8 days. Less than a month before the hegemony would attack Earth, before they would try to wipe out most of humanity and enslave the rest. And nobody knew about it except him. Jake continued his cleaning route, but his attention was elsewhere. He thought about the conversations he had overheard in recent weeks. Suddenly, things that had seemed like normal trade discussions took on new meaning. The Zephyrian who had been asking detailed questions about Earth's satellite network. The Vorthri who had been very interested in the locations of human military bases. The increased number of hegemony ships that had been visiting the station. They had been planning this for months, maybe years, and they had done it right under everyone's nose, including his. When Jake reached the waste disposal area at the end of his shift, he was exhausted but alert. This was where all the station's garbage was processed before being ejected into space. It was also where people sometimes threw away things they did not want found. As Jake sorted through the waste containers, his fingers touched something unusual. A small data chip, no bigger than his thumbnail. It had been wrapped in waste paper and thrown away, but Jake's trained eye caught the metallic glint. He pocketed the chip quickly and continued his work. Later, in the privacy of his small maintenance room, he plugged the chip into a portable reader. What he saw on the screen made his worst fears come true. Detailed invasion plans, ship positions, weapon specifications, target lists with the names of every major human city, timetables showing exactly when each phase of the attack would begin. It was everything the Nexus robots had been talking about, and much more. Jake stared at the screen for a long time. In his hands was proof of the greatest threat humanity had ever faced. The question was, what could he do about it? He was just a janitor. Nobody would listen to him. Nobody would believe him, but Jake Thompson had not spent 20 years in this role to give up now. Somehow, he had to find a way to warn Earth. Somehow. He had to stop this invasion from happening. The fate of his entire species might depend on what he did next. Jake Thompson spent the rest of his shift thinking about what he had discovered. By the time the morning crew arrived at the station, he had made his decision. He had to warn someone, and he had to do it quickly. The first person he needed to talk to was Ambassador Patricia Wells. She was the head of the human diplomatic mission on the station. If anyone would listen to his warning about the alien invasion, it should be her. Jake changed out of his janitor uniform and put on his best civilian clothes. He walked to the diplomatic section of the station, an area he normally only entered to clean. The corridors here were wider and brighter than the maintenance areas, where he usually worked. The ambassador's office was behind a large wooden door with brass fittings. It was designed to look like something from Earth, to make human visitors feel more comfortable. Jake knocked on the door and waited. "Come in," called a voice from inside. Jake entered the office. Ambassador Wells was sitting behind a large desk, reading reports on her tablet. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes. She wore an expensive blue suit that probably cost more than Jake made in a month. "Yes?" she said without looking up from her tablet. "What do you want?" "Ambassador Wells, my name. Is Jake Thompson? I work on the station, and I need to speak with you about something very important." "Are you with the trade delegation?" she asked, still not looking at him. "No, ma'am. I'm a maintenance worker, but I have information about a threat to Earth." Now she looked up, and Jake could see the annoyance in her eyes. "Maintenance? You mean you're a janitor?" "Yes, ma'am, but please listen to me. I've discovered evidence of a planned attack on Earth by the hegemony. They're planning to invade in less than a month." Ambassador Wells put down her tablet and stared at Jake for a moment. Then she started laughing. It was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that made Jake feel very small. "A janitor thinks he's discovered a galactic conspiracy?" She said, "That's rich. Do you have any idea how many crazy reports I get every week? People claiming they've overheard alien plots, found secret messages, discovered hidden weapons. It's always nonsense." "Ma'am, I have proof," Jake said, reaching for the data chip in his pocket. "I don't have time for this," Ambassador Wells said firmly. "I have real diplomatic work to do, important trade negotiations, actual threats to deal with. I can't waste my time listening to the fantasies of maintenance staff." She pressed a button on her desk. A moment later, a security guard entered the office. "Please escort Mr. Thompson back to the maintenance sections," she told the guard. "And make sure he understands that he's not to bother diplomatic personnel again." Jake tried to speak, but the guard was already moving toward him. "Come on, buddy," the guard said. "Time to go?" Jake left the ambassador's office feeling frustrated but not defeated. There had to be someone else who would listen to him. Someone who would take the threat seriously. His next stop was the military liaison office. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Burke was in charge of station security and military coordination. As a fellow military man, maybe he would understand the importance of Jake's discovery. The military office was smaller than the ambassador's but more organized. Charts and maps covered the walls, showing ship movements and patrol routes throughout the local star system. Lieutenant Commander Burke was a younger man, probably in his 30s, with short black hair and the kind of posture that came from years of military training. "What can I do for you?" Burke asked when Jake entered. "Sir, I need to report a serious threat to Earth security. I've discovered evidence that the hegemony is planning an invasion." Burke leaned back in his chair and studied Jake's face. "And you are?" "Jake Thompson, sir. I work maintenance on the station." "Maintenance," Burke repeated slowly. "So you're not military intelligence, you're not a diplomat. You're not a security officer, you're a janitor." "Yes, sir, but I was military. Once, I served in the Defense Corps for 15 years before taking this position." "Really?" Burke said, his tone suggesting he didn't believe it. "What was your rank?" Jake hesitated. He couldn't reveal his true background without compromising his mission. "I was a sergeant, sir, infantry." "A sergeant," Burke said with a small smile. "And now you think you've uncovered a threat that our professional intelligence services haven't noticed?" "Sir, I have physical evidence, a data chip with detailed invasion plans." Burke held out his hand. "Let me see it." Jake handed over the chip. Burke plugged it into his computer and looked at the screen for about 30 seconds. "This is in alien languages," he said. "How am I supposed to read this?" "I can translate it, sir. I've learned several alien languages during my time on the station." "You speak alien languages?" Burke said, his voice full of doubt. "A maintenance worker learned alien languages?" "Yes, sir." "If you just let me explain what the files contain." "Look, Thompson," Burke interrupted. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but leave military matters to the military, okay? We have trained professionals handling security threats. We don't need janitors playing spy." He handed the chip back to Jake. "I suggest you focus on your cleaning duties and let us handle the real work." Jake left the military office feeling even more frustrated. Two important people had dismissed him without even listening to what he had to say, but he couldn't give up. Too many lives were at stake. His third attempt was with the communications center. If he couldn't convince the people on the station, Maybe he could contact Earth directly. Sergeant Lisa Martinez was on duty when Jake arrived. She was a young woman with red hair and freckles who looked like she might be more willing to listen than the others. "I need to send an urgent message." "To Earth Defense Command," Jake told her. "Okay," she said. "Fill out this form with your authorization code and the classification level of your message." Jake looked at the form. He didn't have an authorization code for sending military messages. His cover identity as a janitor didn't include communication. "Privileges. I don't have an authorization code," he admitted. "But this is an emergency. I have information about a planned attack on Earth." Sergeant Martinez looked up from her computer. "You don't have authorization? Then who are you?" "I work maintenance on the station. But I've discovered something that Earth needs to know about." Immediately, she started laughing. "A janitor discovered a galactic conspiracy?" "Right, and I suppose you want me to contact the Secretary of Defense personally?" "Please, just listen to me for 1 minute," Jake said desperately. "The hegemony is planning to attack Earth in 27 days. They're going to use an electromagnetic pulse to disable our defenses, then bombard our cities from orbit." "Sure they are," Martinez said, still laughing. "Tell you what, I'll file this under creative fiction. Maybe you should consider writing science fiction novels instead of cleaning floors." Jake tried to show her the data chip, but she wasn't interested. "Look, I'm busy with real communications work," she said. "Why don't you go back to your mops and let the professionals handle the important stuff?" Strike 3. Jake walked slowly back to his quarters, feeling defeated. 3 chances to warn someone, and all 3 had failed. Nobody wanted to listen to a janitor. Nobody believed that someone like him could have important information. But as Jake sat in his small room, staring at the data chip that contained proof of humanity's doom, he realized something important. The aliens had made a mistake when they ignored him all these years. They had treated him like he was invisible, like he didn't matter. And that had given him access to information that no one else had if the humans on the station wouldn't listen. To him, maybe it was time to take matters into his own hands. Jake had spent 20 years learning about alien technology, alien psychology, alien weaknesses. He knew more about the species planning to attack Earth than anyone else in the human government. The invasion was still 27 days away. That gave him time to act. Time to use everything he had learned during his years of pretending to be nobody important. Jake Thompson might just be a janitor to everyone else. But he was also a trained intelligence officer with 2 decades of experience in the field. And he was about to remind the galaxy why underestimating humans was always a mistake. The aliens thought they were so clever, planning their attack right under humanity's nose. They had no idea that their biggest threat was the man who had been quietly cleaning up their messes for 20 years. It was time for Jake to stop cleaning and start fighting. Jake Thompson sat in his small room for 3 hours studying the data chip and making plans. If nobody would listen to his warnings, then he would have to stop the invasion himself. It seemed impossible, but Jake had learned long ago that impossible. Things often became possible when nobody was watching. The first thing he needed to do was understand exactly how the alien attack would work. Jake plugged the chip into his personal computer and began reading through the files. The invasion plan was detailed and terrifying, but it also showed him something important. The aliens were overconfident. They thought humans were weak and stupid. That overconfidence would be their weakness. The attack would begin with electromagnetic pulse weapons fired from hidden ships in the outer solar system. These weapons would shut down Earth's power grids, disable communications, and knock out military satellites. After that, the main fleet would move in for orbital bombardment. The aliens expected the whole operation to take less than 6 hours, but Jake noticed something the aliens had missed. Their plan required perfect coordination between 6 different species, each with their own technology and communication systems. If he could disrupt that coordination, their carefully planned attack might fall apart. Jake spent the next morning preparing. He went to the station's computer center during his normal cleaning shift. The aliens were used to seeing him there, cleaning terminals and emptying trash bins. They paid no attention as he worked, What they didn't know was that Jake had been studying their computer systems for 20 years. He knew how to access their networks, how to move through their security systems, and most importantly, how to plant information that would look real to them. Jake's first target was the Nexus Collective. The robot aliens relied completely on their computer networks for everything. If he could confuse their computers, he could confuse them. While cleaning around their workstations, Jake inserted a small device into one of their data ports. The device looked like a standard cleaning tool, but it was actually a sophisticated virus that Jake had spent years developing. The virus was designed to spread slowly through the Nexus network, changing small details in their navigation systems. Not enough to be noticed right away, but enough to cause problems when they tried to coordinate their attack. Their ships would arrive at the wrong locations. Their weapons would target empty space. Their timing would be off by crucial minutes. Next, Jake targeted the Zephyrian delegation. The bear-like aliens were proud warriors, but they were also superstitious. They believed in omens and signs that predicted the future. Jake had learned this by listening to their conversations over the years. Jake began planting fake omens around the Zephyrian quarters. He left behind small objects arranged in patterns that the Zephyrians would interpret as bad luck. He spilled liquids in shapes that looked like ancient warning symbols. He even played recordings of bird sounds that the Zephyrians believed predicted disaster. The Zephyrians began to notice the signs within a few days. Jake overheard them talking nervously about the omens during his cleaning shifts. They were starting to doubt whether the invasion was blessed by their gods. The Vorthri were more difficult to manipulate. The crystal aliens were logical and hard to fool, but Jake had learned something important about them over the years. They were incredibly proud of their superior technology and intelligence. They looked down on all other species, including their hegemony allies. Jake began feeding false information into the Vorthri communication systems. He created fake intelligence reports that suggested the other hegemony species were planning to betray the Vorthri after the invasion. The reports claimed that the Nexus Collective wanted to steal Vorthri technology, and that the Zephyrians planned to claim the best human territories for themselves. The Vorthri pride made them believe these reports easily. They started becoming suspicious of their allies, questioning their motives, and demanding more control over the invasion. Plans. Jake also targeted the smaller hegemony species. The Kreks were insect-like creatures who communicated through chemical signals. Jake had learned to create simple chemical messages over the years by studying their waste products. He began leaving chemical trails that suggested the invasion was being compromised by security leaks. The Drakmor were reptilian aliens who valued honor above everything else. Jake planted evidence suggesting that the surprise attack on Earth was dishonorable, that the human leaders should be challenged to single combat. Instead of being bombed from orbit, the Tholus were energy beings who lived in containment suits. They were paranoid about their energy supplies running low. Jake began creating false reports about energy shortages in the invasion fleet, making them worry that they wouldn't have enough power to complete their part of the attack. While Jake was spreading confusion among the hegemony species, he was also gathering more intelligence. He listened to their conversations, recorded their communications, and mapped their ship movements. Every night, he added new information to his files. Jake learned that the hegemony fleet was hiding in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. They had been there for months, slowly building up their forces. The main command ship was a massive Vorthri vessel called the Crystal Fang. The electromagnetic pulse weapons were mounted on smaller, faster ships that could get close to Earth without being detected. Jake also discovered something that made his blood run cold. The invasion was even worse than he had originally thought. The aliens weren't just planning to conquer Earth. They were planning to use humans as slaves to mine resources on other worlds. Children would be taken from their families and raised to serve alien masters. The elderly and sick would be killed immediately as being worthless. This knowledge made Jake work even harder. He began sabotaging alien equipment directly. While cleaning their quarters, he would make small adjustments to their computers, their weapons, and their communication devices. Nothing obvious, Just tiny changes that would cause malfunctions at crucial moments. Jake removed important components from Nexus repair kits. He contaminated Zephyrian weapon lubricants with substances that would cause their guns to jam. He introduced microscopic flaws into Vorthree, crystal matrices that would cause their shields to fail under stress. The aliens began experiencing technical problems, but they blamed the issues on the age of their equipment or simple bad luck. None of them suspected that their humble human janitor was waging a one-man war against their entire invasion force after 2 weeks of sabotage. Jake could see that his efforts were having an effect. The hegemony delegates were arguing more frequently. Their meetings were lasting longer as they tried to solve problems that Jake had created. The invasion timeline was starting to slip as they dealt with technical failures and communication breakdowns, but Jake knew that his sabotage would only buy time. The aliens would eventually figure out what was happening, and when they did, they would move quickly to stop him. He needed help, but where could he find it? The answer came from an unexpected source. While cleaning the docking bay one night, Jake noticed a small freighter that had just arrived. The ship was called the New Horizon, and it was registered to an independent trader named Captain Elena Rodriguez. Jake had seen Captain Rodriguez around the station before, but she had never paid much attention to him. She was a woman in her 40s with dark hair and intelligent eyes. She carried herself like someone who had seen a lot of trouble and learned how to handle it. What caught Jake's attention was a conversation he overheard between Captain Rodriguez and her crew. They were talking about unusual alien ship movements in the outer system. They had noticed the same things Jake had been tracking, but they didn't know what it meant. Jake realized that Captain Rodriguez might be his only chance to find someone who would listen to him. Someone who was already suspicious of alien activities. Someone who might be willing to help him stop the invasion. Jake made his decision. It was time to reveal himself to someone else. Time to take the biggest risk of his 20-year mission. Time to trust another human being with the fate of their entire species. The next morning, Jake would approach Captain Rodriguez. He would tell her everything he had learned, show her all the evidence he had gathered, and ask for her help. Together, they might be able to do what he couldn't do alone. Jake spent the rest of the night preparing for what might be the most important conversation of his life. In less than 2 weeks, the alien invasion would begin. Everything now depended on whether Captain Rodriguez would believe the word of a simple janitor who claimed to be humanity's last hope. Jake Thompson waited until Captain Elena Rodriguez was alone in the docking bay before he approached her. She was checking the cargo manifest on her tablet, making sure everything was properly loaded for her next journey. Her ship, the New Horizon, sat behind her like a sleeping metal giant. Captain Rodriguez? Jake said quietly, walking up to her with his cleaning cart. She looked up from her tablet and saw the janitor uniform. Yes? Is there something wrong with the bay cleaning? No. Ma'am, I need to speak with you about something very important. Something that concerns the safety of Earth. Elena studied his face carefully. There was something different about this janitor. He stood straighter than most maintenance workers. His eyes were alert and intelligent. He spoke with confidence, despite his humble uniform. What's your name? She asked. Jake Thompson. I've been working on this station for 20 years. And what makes you think I should listen to what a janitor has to say about Earth's safety? Jake had expected this question. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. It looked like a standard cleaning tool, but when he pressed a button on the side, it projected a holographic display showing alien ship movements throughout the solar system. Elena's eyes widened. That's not janitor equipment. No, ma'am, it's not. I used to be Captain Jake Thompson of the Human Defense Corps. I've been on an undercover mission for the past 20 years. Gathering intelligence on alien activities at this station. Elena looked around the docking bay to make sure they were still alone. Prove it. Jake pulled out his old military identification card. It was hidden in a secret compartment of his cleaning cart, wrapped in protective material. The card showed his picture from 20 years ago, along with his rank and service record. Elena examined the card carefully. This could be fake. It could be, Jake agreed. But what I'm about to tell you is real, and if you don't help me, billions of people are going to die in less than 2 weeks. Something in Jake's voice made Elena believe him. She had been a trader for 15 years, and she had learned to read people. This man was telling the truth. What kind of threat are we talking about? She asked. Jake told her everything. About the overheard conversations, the data chip, the invasion plans, his failed attempts to warn the authorities, and his ongoing sabotage efforts. He showed her the files he had gathered, translating the alien languages for her. Elena listened, in growing horror as Jake explained the scope of the hegemony's plans. The electromagnetic pulse attack, the orbital bombardment, the enslavement of survivors. It was worse than anything she had imagined. Why should I believe any of this? She asked when Jake finished. It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie? Because you've noticed the same things I have, Jake replied. You told your crew about unusual ship movements in the outer system. You've seen the increased alien activity on this station. You know something is wrong. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Jake was right. She had been suspicious about alien activities for months. Too many military ships passing through areas where they had no business being. Too many closed meetings between species that usually didn't get along. Too many questions about Earth's defenses from aliens who claimed to be peaceful traders. Let's say I believe you, Elena said finally. What can we do about it? You're a spy and I'm a freighter captain. We're not exactly equipped to stop a galactic invasion. We don't have to stop it alone, Jake said. But we can expose it. We can gather enough evidence to force the galactic authorities to pay attention. And we can continue the sabotage efforts I've already started. Elena thought about her own past. 5 years ago, the hegemony had attacked a mining colony where her husband and daughter had been living. The official report claimed it was a pirate raid, but Elena had never believed that story. The attack had been too organized, too thorough. Now she was learning that it might have been a test run for something much bigger. What do you need from me? She asked. Your ship, your contacts, and your help, Jake said. I've been working alone for too long. I need someone who can travel freely between systems, someone who knows people throughout the human territories. Elena nodded slowly. I have contacts in the merchant fleet, some connections in the military, and a few friends in the intelligence community. But most of them won't believe a story this big without solid proof. Then we'll get them solid proof, Jake said. I know where the hegemony fleet is hiding. I know their communication codes. I know their weaknesses. With your ship, we can gather the evidence we need. Over the next 3 days, Jake and Elena worked together to plan their mission. Elena introduced Jake to her crew, telling them only that he was a consultant helping with some security issues. Her crew consisted of 3 people, Dr. Kevin Walsh, who served as the ship's medic and science officer, Commander Susan Hayes, a former military officer who had been discharged for speaking out against alien threats, and Marcus Chun, a young engineer who kept the ship running. Dr. Walsh was a quiet man in his 50s who had spent years studying alien biology. He had noticed disturbing patterns in hegemony behavior, but had been ignored by the scientific community. When Jake shared his intelligence, Dr. Walsh was able to confirm many details about alien psychology and technology. Commander Hayes was more skeptical at first. She had been kicked out of the military for claiming that the hegemony was preparing for war. Her warnings had been dismissed as paranoia, and her career had been destroyed. But when Jake showed her the invasion plans, she realized that everything she had suspected was true. Marcus Chun was the youngest member of the group, but he was also the most technically skilled. He understood both human and alien technology, well enough to help Jake improve his sabotage efforts. He also had contacts among other young engineers throughout the human fleet. Together, the 5 of them began planning a more ambitious operation. Jake's individual sabotage efforts had been effective, but they needed to do more. They needed to create a resistance network that could disrupt the invasion on multiple levels. Elena used her trading connections to recruit other ship captains who had noticed suspicious alien activities. Dr. Walsh reached out to xenobiologists who had been studying hegemony species. Commander Hayes contacted former military officers who had been warning about alien threats for years. Marcus Chun began spreading information through engineering networks. Disguising it as technical discussions, within a week, they had assembled a loose network of nearly 50 people throughout the human territories. Most of them didn't know the full scope of the threat, but they were all willing to help gather intelligence and spread information. Jake continued his sabotage work on the station, but now he had help. Eleanor's crew members would visit the station regularly, posing as normal traders while actually planting surveillance devices and communication jammers. Dr. Walsh analyzed alien waste products to understand their health and stress levels. Commander Hayes studied their military formations and tactics. Marcus Chen hacked their computer systems to plant more sophisticated viruses. The hegemony delegates were becoming increasingly frustrated. Their equipment kept malfunctioning. Their communications were being disrupted. Their allies were becoming suspicious of each other. The invasion timeline had already been pushed back twice as they tried to solve problems that seemed to multiply faster than they could fix them, but Jake knew that time was running out. The aliens were starting to suspect that their problems were not just bad luck. Security around the hegemony quarters had been increased. Some of the delegates were talking about moving the invasion forward to avoid further delays. Jake also knew that his network, impressive as it was, still wasn't enough to stop the invasion completely. They needed someone with real authority, someone who could mobilize the full resources of human space. They needed to reach someone who could order the human fleet into action. The answer came from an unexpected source. Commander Hayes had been monitoring military communications, as she discovered that Galactic Commander Theron Voss was scheduled to visit the station in 3 days. Voss was the highest-ranking military officer in the Galactic Defense Coalition, the organization responsible for keeping peace between species. "This is our chance," Elena said when they gathered to discuss the news. "If we can convince Commander Voss, he has the authority to stop the invasion." "But how do we get to him?" Jake asked. "The hegemony will be watching him closely. They'll want to make sure he doesn't discover their plans." "We don't go to him," Elena said with a smile. "We make him come to us." Jake looked at her questioningly. "You've, been the perfect spy for 20 years because nobody notices a janitor," Elena explained. "When Commander Voss arrives, you'll be cleaning his quarters just like you clean everyone else's. And you'll leave behind everything we've gathered. Every file, every recording, every piece of evidence we have." Jake nodded slowly. It was a risky plan, but it might be their only chance to reach someone with the power to stop the invasion. In 3 days, Commander Voss would arrive at the station. In 3 days, Jake would reveal 20 years of carefully gathered intelligence to the one person who might be able to save Earth. Everything depended on whether the most powerful military officer in the galaxy would listen to the warnings of a simple janitor. Galactic Commander Theron Voss arrived at the station exactly on schedule. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of presence that made everyone around him stand straighter. His uniform was covered with medals from conflicts across the galaxy, and his reputation for fairness and intelligence was known throughout human space. Jake Thompson watched from a distance as commander. Voss was greeted by Ambassador Wells and the other station officials. The hegemony delegates were also present, smiling and acting like honored guests welcoming an important visitor. Jake felt sick watching them pretend to be peaceful while planning humanity's destruction. Commander Voss was given the best quarters. On the station, a large suite in the diplomatic section. Jake knew he would have access to clean those quarters during the night shift, just like he cleaned every other room on the station. This would be his chance to deliver 20 years of intelligence to the one person who might be able to stop the invasion. The day passed slowly as Jake went through his normal routine. He cleaned floors, emptied trash bins, and listened to conversations. The hegemony delegates were nervous about Commander Voss's visit, but they were trying to act normal. They held their usual meetings and continued their invasion preparations, but Jake could tell they were worried. That evening, Jake met with Elena and her crew one final time before making his move. They gathered in the cargo hold of the New Horizon, away from any listening devices. "Everything is ready," Elena said, handing Jake a specially prepared data package. "We've compiled every piece of evidence you've gathered over the past 20 years, plus everything we've discovered in the last 2 weeks. Ship movements, communication intercepts, sabotage documentation, invasion timelines, it's all there." Dr. Walsh nodded. "I've included biological analysis of the alien species, showing their stress levels and health status. The data proves they've been preparing for military action." Commander Hayes added, "The military formation data shows classic invasion patterns. No peaceful organization would arrange their ships this way." Marcus Chun held up a small device. "This contains video recordings of hegemony communications discussing the attack. I've also included technical specifications of their weapons and defensive systems." Jake took the data package and secured it in his cleaning cart. "If this works, Commander Voss will have everything he needs to stop the invasion and expose the conspiracy." "And if it doesn't work?" Elena asked. "Then we keep fighting," Jake said simply. "But this is our best chance. Commander Voss has the authority to mobilize the entire Galactic Defense Coalition. He can order investigations, deploy fleets, and coordinate with other species who oppose the hegemony." Jake returned to his quarters and waited for the night shift to begin. At midnight he started his cleaning route, beginning with the less important areas and working his way toward Commander Voss's suite. His heart was beating faster than usual, but his hands were steady. After 20 years of preparation, this was the moment everything had been leading to. Jake reached Commander Voss's quarters at 2 in the morning. He used his master key to enter quietly, expecting to find the commander asleep. Instead, he found Voss sitting at a desk, reading reports by lamplight. "Good evening," Commander Voss said without looking up. "You must be the night janitor." "Yes, sir," Jake replied, his voice carefully neutral. "I can come back later if you prefer. No need. I'm a light sleeper anyway. Please go ahead with your work." Jake began cleaning the room, but instead of his usual efficient routine, he took his time. He was waiting for the right moment to leave the data package where Commander Voss would find it. But as he worked, he realized that Voss was watching him carefully. "You move differently than most janitors," Commander Voss observed. "Military training?" Jake paused in his cleaning. "Some, sir." "Long time ago? What branch?" "Defense Corps, sir. Infantry." Commander Voss nodded. "I can always tell. The posture never quite goes away, does it?" Jake continued his work, but he could feel the commander's eyes on him. Finally, he made his decision. Instead of leaving the data package hidden where Voss might not find it, Jake would have to take a bigger risk. "Sir," Jake said, turning to face the commander, "I have something that I believe you need to see." Commander Voss looked up from his reports, his expression curious. "Oh?" Jake reached into his cleaning cart and pulled out the data package. 20 years of intelligence on a planned invasion of Earth by the Hegemony Alliance. For a moment, Commander Voss just stared at him. Then he set down his reports and gave Jake his full attention. 20 years, he repeated. "And you are?" "Captain Jake Thompson, Human Defense Corps Intelligence. Currently operating under deep cover as a maintenance worker on this station." Commander Voss leaned back in his chair. "Captain Thompson. I've heard that name before. You were reported missing in action 15 years ago during a reconnaissance mission." "Not missing, sir. Reassigned to long-term intelligence gathering. My mission was to observe alien activities at this station and report on any threats to human security." "And you've discovered a threat?" Jake handed over the data package. "The Hegemony Alliance is planning to attack Earth in 8 days. Electromagnetic pulse weapons followed by orbital bombardment. They intend to kill 60% of the human population and enslave the rest." Commander Voss took the package and plugged it into his personal computer. For the next hour, he reviewed the files while Jake stood quietly nearby. The commander's expression grew increasingly grim as he read through the invasion plans, listened to the recorded conversations, and studied the intelligence Jake had gathered. "This is comprehensive," Commander Voss said finally. More detailed than anything our official intelligence services have produced. How did you gather all this information? By being invisible, sir. For 20 years, every alien on this station has treated me like furniture. They talk freely around me because they think I'm just a simple janitor who can't understand their languages or technology. But you can understand them, yes, sir? I speak 12 alien languages and have studied their technology extensively. I know their strengths, their weaknesses, and their plans. Commander Voss closed the files and looked directly at Jake. Captain Thompson, this intelligence suggests that you've been conducting a solo operation against an entire galactic alliance. Sabotage, psychological warfare, network disruption. Is that accurate? Yes, sir. I couldn't get anyone to listen to my warnings, so I took action to delay the invasion and gather more evidence. You've been fighting a war by yourself. Not entirely. By myself, sir. I recently recruited a small team of allies. But yes, for most of the past 20 years I've been operating alone. Commander Voss stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Captain Thompson, what you've accomplished here is extraordinary. This intelligence will allow us to prevent the invasion and expose the hegemony's true intentions to the entire galaxy. Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. Thank you, sir. However, Commander Voss continued, we need to act quickly. If the hegemony suspects that their plans have been discovered, they may accelerate their timeline. I understand, sir. What? Are your orders? Commander Voss turned back to Jake. We're going to set a trap. The hegemony delegates are planning to hold a final coordination meeting tomorrow night. They think they're safe here, that no one suspects their true purpose? We're going to let them believe that while we prepare a surprise of our own. The next evening, the hegemony delegates gathered in the main conference room for what they believed would be their final planning session before the invasion. Jake was there as usual, quietly emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces while the aliens discussed their attack on Earth. But this time, Jake was not alone. Hidden throughout the station were members of the Galactic Defense Coalition, recording every word of the meeting. Elena and her crew were monitoring alien communications. Dr. Walsh was analyzing their biological responses. Commander Hayes was coordinating with human fleet elements that had been secretly positioned throughout the system. At exactly midnight, Commander Voss entered the conference room with a full security detail. The hegemony delegates looked up in surprise as armed guards surrounded them. Ladies and gentlemen, Commander Voss announced, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit genocide and violations of the Galactic Peace Accords. The alien delegates began protesting their innocence, claiming they were peaceful traders and diplomats. But Commander Voss was ready for their denials. Agent Thompson, he said, looking directly at Jake, who was still standing quietly in the corner with his cleaning cart. I believe you have something to report. Jake straightened to his full height, his posture shifting from humble janitor to seasoned intelligence officer. The aliens stared in shock as the human they had ignored for 20 years suddenly commanded the attention of the most powerful military officer in the galaxy. Sir, Jake said in a clear, authoritative voice, I have comprehensive intelligence. On a conspiracy to attack Earth, detailed evidence of the perpetrators' capabilities and intentions, and documentation of their violation of 17 different galactic treaties. The room fell completely silent as the reality of the situation sank in. The hegemony delegates realized that their careful plans had been discovered by the one person they had never